Welcome everybody to the Jersey Baseball Show. Today we are here with one of the true people who have revolutionized the game of online training, online pitching training. It's TREAD Athletics and Ben BREWSTER, our special guest today. Welcome, Ben, and how's everything down in Charlotte?
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me. It's a little colder than I'd like, but can't complain. I was actually out in Illinois for the holidays. Quite a bit colder out there, so pretty excited with what's going on here in Charlotte.
Absolutely. And you're from a little further closer north than Charlotte anyway, right? I mean,
yeah, up near you, from Maryland, Baltimore, Maryland originally.
Yeah.
Played college ball in University of Maryland, so I'm used to the cold, but that's one reason why I wanted to get down here a little bit.
That's right. Turf weather doesn't discriminate in February or March.
Exactly.
This is still warm for you as a whole, but
yeah.
Want to do let's jump right in and talk about TREAD Athletics. Obviously one of the best known and really best run, in my opinion, online pitching platform, remote training. Really the future of how remote training has kind of grown in recent years and sort of where we see it in the future. But first of all, your story, the story of TREAD is a fascinating one to me. So let's kind of hit everybody with that, how we started.
Sure. Yeah. So it's hard to talk about TREAD without talking about my own, career, because they're very much intertwined. So, I was the kid in high school who was freshman, sophomore, really struggled. I was throwing, I think, 70 to 73 miles an hour going into my sophomore year. Really the first time I ever got on a radar gun. And I had no idea what I was doing. I'd never had a formal pitching coach. I'd never played, competitive travel baseball. I just knew that I wanted to play at the next level at that point, and that I was willing to pay whatever price it took to get there. And so from there, it was really a process of me making a ton of mistakes, reading for hours and hours a day, trying every training program I could find online. Didn't have anyone in my high school who took baseball seriously. Didn't really know anybody who took baseball seriously. So it was really me on my own trying to figure it out. Fast forward a few years, and as a senior in high school, I got accepted to a bunch of schools to study exercise science. I was like, okay, well, I'm not getting recruited anywhere, but I might as well, wherever I go, study exercise science and use that to help me with my training. Maybe I'll learn something, maybe I'll pick something up, and then I can make the baseball team at whatever school, I end up going to that has a baseball team. So I ended up choosing to go to University of Maryland because I'm from Baltimore, and I was already accepted to the honors program, all that stuff. And it's the summer before, starting as a freshman. So it's that end of June, I think early July, somewhere around there. They had a recruiting camp. One of these, and anyone who knows these recruiting camps, they're not really recruiting camps, right? It's mostly it's how they pay the assistant coach. The assistant coach runs it. It's kind of a fundraising thing, basically, for the program. And if they see a couple of prospects they like, they might follow them, over the next couple of years. So it's not really something you go to get recruited. But I went to this camp and I was like, I'm going to get recruited out of this camp. I'm going to tell the coach who I am. I had just come off a fairly successful senior season in high school, where I was finally throwing mid 80s. I'd thrown taking my team to the state championship in my conference. So I was like, I'm going to go to this thing and get recruited out of it, which in retrospect, shouldn't have been what my goal was, because it's naive to think that was possible. But I went to this event. I had already sent a bunch of emails to the coach. I'd found him before this event started, explained who I was. So he knew I was a lefty, had put up some results. So I go out there, throw a couple innings in this inter squad game. I strike out 6 out of 6 batters. Again, not great high school hitters that I was facing, but whatever reason I came in and he was like, I was impressed. You have a spot on the team. And I mean, just knowing that I'd, at that point only spent 4 years training, but knowing there was actually a payoff from that, was pretty cool. But there was kind of a shock then 2 months later, because I get on campus and now I'm the worst player on the team. I'm the guy throwing 83, 85, right. Whereas everyone else is throwing 87, 90, 89, 93. And so again, I'm the walk-on guy who's riding the bench, and I have to figure out what I'm doing. And long story short, over those next 4 years, again, I'm figuring out, getting injured, making a ton of training mistakes, have no idea what I'm doing, changing my mechanics every week, but I'm learning the entire time. And I end up going from 85 to touching 95 as a senior. I ended up getting drafted in the 15th round by the White Sox. End up having a good first year with the White Sox, and just kind of running into a bunch of injuries, getting released a year and a half later. I'm actually still training to try to get healthy, but since that point, since 2016 when I got released, I've had 2 elbow surgeries and 2 hip surgeries. So my body's kind of a mess, but at this point I've been up to 98 miles an hour after my first elbow surgery as a lefty. So I'm still very much trying to get my body healthy, but long story short, in the process of learning from this entire journey over the past 15 years, I've learned a lot. I've made it a concerted effort to share as much of this information as possible, so that other people don't have to go through so many mistakes that I made. I like to think of training as a trial and error process. And that's something that Paul Nyman, who's in many ways like Tom House, one of the grandfathers of kind of modern day pitching mechanics theory, he's one of the first to explain, like, look, there isn't actually a set of perfect throwing mechanics. It's going to be unique and different for every single person. And what's efficient for one, there are some general principles, general guidelines, but what works for one person isn't necessarily going to work for the next person. And so it really requires kind of continually beating your head into a wall until you figure it out. But what a good coach does is shorten that trial and error process. It's like, here's a bunch of things not to do.
Right.
Now you're experimenting within this range instead of trying a bunch of stuff that we know for sure is probably not going to work for you. So how TREAD comes into that story, right around 2015 is when we started TREAD. I was going into my second year of pro ball, and it was at that time, because I was still playing professional baseball, it's not like I could have in-person coaching clients. But through that entire process, through high school, through college, I've been keeping this blog online, basically documenting my progress every week. Like, here's my body weight, here's my velo. I was down this week. This was a tough training week. Hey, I hit a new personal record. I was documenting this whole thing in an online pitching blog or log. And so it had kind of accumulated some followers. I get drafted. I'm going into my first full season of pro ball, and people start reaching out. Dads that have been following it, players that have been following it, kind of using it first for motivation, start reaching out. Hey, can you write a program for my kid? Hey, can you look at my son's mechanics? Hey, what should I do to increase my velocity? And people started reaching out. They started offering to pay me to help. And I was like, no, I'll help you for free. It's fine. But along the way, I started to realize,
right? Great businessman.
yeah, after the first few, it's like, I could turn this into a legitimate service. Like, we actually have a way to help these kids remotely. It's not as much about having someone there every rep, every throw, every rep in the weight room. It's about having a plan, a cohesive plan that comes together that actually works. And so, my business partner at the time, he came in full time. I was still I was still pursuing professional baseball, but in the off season, it was full time, starting TREAD, doing everything we could to build the systems. Like, how are we? Okay, so we have 30 athletes, now we have 50, now we have 100. What are we going to do when we have 1,000 athletes? What are we going to do when we have 5,000? Like, so we were building the systems way ahead of time to be able to figure out how to get guys better, not being in person with them. And so, unlike most companies where they start with a brick and mortar facility, and then 5 or 10 years down the line, they're like, oh, there's this remote training thing. Like, let's try to scrap something together. I think we were the only company that was a remote first, certainly one of the first ones to offer remote training. But that was our exclusive offering. It's not like that was an add-on. It was all we did. It was all we had to figure out for the first 5 years of TREAD, was how do we get players better online. And so we kind of went through this proof of concept phase from 2015 to about 2018, where it was just gathering testimonials, gathering case studies, just putting in the time, the hours to figure out how this thing really worked from a remote standpoint. And so I've evolved, grown a lot as a coach. Everything I've been learning, I've been trying to put out online, put out for free. So, while we do coach a ton of players, we've now coached thousands of players since 2015, including dozens of big leaguers, hundreds of professional pitchers, thousands of college, thousands of high school. We put out 98% of our information for free. So when I discover something, I have some, profound, hopefully wise thought. Like, I'm not just like hoarding it. Like, I'm trying to put this information out, open source it, and use it to further the baseball communal knowledge as a whole. And so I think that's one of the special things about TREAD, is we're talking right before the call, is it's not just, the one-on-one athletes that we work with that get to reap the benefits. It's for every one of those, there's 100 other people that follow us that have never actually scheduled a call with us, but they're still gaining value from it. And so that's exciting for me to see. You just kind of you put that information out there into the world. You do your best to, you just kind of cross your fingers and hope that it reaches the right people. So it's really neat to see people reach out and say like, wow, this actually had a profound impact on my knowledge, my career. And so I'd say that's one of the most rewarding things for me is, yeah, it's rewarding to see the athletes that we work with directly, go on to get college scholarships, go on to get drafted. But it's actually more rewarding to see like that impact is actually magnified 10 or 100 times to the people that I don't even know exist.
Right. Yeah. And so and that was, what caught my attention first was the great stuff that, whether it was on YouTube or your site or, I guess it all links to the same place. But best way to get there, for those who just want to start at that level, would you say they're on, via YouTube? Would it be just to go on the TREAD Athletics site, or you've got your Twitter, which is over 60,000 or 25,000 followers. The Instagram's over 60,000. Where's the best way to get that information?
So YouTube is going to be kind of the quickest way to get up to speed on a lot of the concepts and philosophy, because those are, each of those videos, by the way, takes over 8 to 10 hours of time to like plan, go film, produce, at least. I mean, some of them take 20 hours of my time and 20 hours of our video editor's time to produce some of those, like the Aldous Chapman breakdown. So those are like well planned out concepts that are organized, laid out. That's really where I would start as far as learning. From there, once you've kind of gone through those videos, Twitter and Instagram are where we kind of share these quick thoughts and discoveries that we're having on a weekly basis. So there's a lot more active engagement happening on Twitter. Like if you tweet at me, I'm going to respond. If you leave a comment on like some YouTube video from 3 years ago, probably less likely that I'm going to see that and respond. So there's a cool engagement aspect on the other platforms.
Absolutely. One of the other things that caught my attention early on was your ebook, the Building the 95-mile-an-hour Body. And I guess that comes a lot from, you were in that mold of, when we talk about lanky, I guess, right? 6'3" and about 150, 155 at the.
Yeah, so freshman year, or going into sophomore year of high school, 6'3", 155. You want me to just kind of talk on my kind of transformation and then how that connects to the book?
Yeah, from basically being the foul pole, right, to being to getting the where it goes. But yeah, if you could, because one of the big things that I had mentioned to you beforehand that I get from people that I appreciate engage with me on the different sites is I'm having trouble putting on weight, or I'm not doing that. And I'm sure you've heard it for years. So yeah, how does your story relate to that and eventually lead into the book?
Yeah, so to sum it up, 6'3", 155, definitely classify myself as kind of a thinner frame guy. Some people would call it a hard gainer, but I was a guy who I felt like I was eating everything. I was eating way more than my family ate, which was kind of my only gauge of was I eating a lot of food. I ate more than my friends, so it must be impossible because I'm eating more than them, and I can't gain weight. So yeah, I think I've been training for a year and a half, and I was still like 165 pounds. Even when I graduated high school, I was 185. I'd never fully figured out. I mean, I gained 30 pounds in 3.5 years, but I really didn't figure it out. I should have been 205, 215 by then if I'd really understood. So I ended up getting to college, and my freshman year, the head coach at the time, Eric Bakich, who's now the Michigan head coach, he really took the strength training and the nutrition seriously, and he was one of the only people that sat me down and sat the entire team down and said, he literally said, nutrition is your steroids. We do nutrition here. Nutrition is, and he opened everybody's eyes to just how important it was from a performance enhancement standpoint. Because you take a guy who's 155 pounds throwing, that's at the time for me 73, but we work with plenty of guys who are throwing 88, weighing $150. And you get that guy to 200 pounds. And I mean, we've had multiple stories of those guys going from 88 to 98. They don't realize it. They don't realize, some of them, just how much is possible if they transform their bodies. And I've played with guys in professional baseball who are $160 throwing 94 from, Dominican Republic, and they don't really get it either. It's dude, you should be throwing 100. And if you knew what I knew and you just followed this, you would put on 40 pounds, and there's no way you're not sitting 98. because these guys move incredibly well. They're incredibly athletic, and like they just don't have that strength base, which requires understanding nutrition to build the strength base. It's not as simple as just going into the weight room and working hard. Like that was never my problem. I lifted every rep as hard as I could all through high school, but I just didn't understand the nutrition piece. So the main thing that I communicate to guys that are struggling to gain weight is you need to actually measure what you're trying to improve if you want to make progress. It's tedious, it's annoying, but you need to measure. And I'm not saying like you have to bust out a little scale and measure every grain of rice when you're eating. The main thing that we measure body weight every day. So our guys measure body weight in the morning, and they're measuring their calories. Those are the two most important things. They're also measuring what are called macronutrients, the grams of the amount of carbs, protein, and fat in their meals. But the main thing is calories in, and then your body weight. So what that means is if we say, hey, this is typical. You'll see a guy who's 6'3", 150 pounds, high school kid, says, I can't gain weight. You ask him how much he's eating. He says, I don't know, a lot. You say, I want you to go measure it for 2 days. He goes, he measures it. He's actually eating 2,500 calories a day. He's not like, they never are actually eating 4,000 plus calories a day. So you put them in this box that they can't escape, because now you have to actually measure it. So you say, okay, our goal is to eat 4,000 calories a day for this next week. Okay, here's how you're going to do it. You're going to eat at least 1,000 with breakfast, 1,000 with lunch, 1,000 with dinner. You're going to have 2 large snacks. Here's sample food sources to get it from. Here's a sample meal plan. You're going to track your calories. You're going to track your body weight every day. They track their body weight the entire time they're with us with their program. So what that does is we can actually measure, are they following the program? So we're able to see their compliance. Are they actually following? If yes, if they stall out, we know, okay, we just need increased calories. If you're eating 4,000 calories a day and you're genuinely not gaining weight, then what we do, and that does happen sometimes, we bump it up. Now we're going to eat 4,200 calories a day and keep following it. If you actually do that and you're still not gaining weight, we bump it up, 4,400. Keep doing that. And like there are 1 in 100 guys like does need 5,000 calories a day to gain weight. They just do. Usually those are the guys that are like also playing high school basketball and they're in basketball season and they're running for 3 hours a day, or they're the guy who's 6'6", like a buck 60, and he's in college and he's like walking to and from class for 3 miles a day. Like there's usually a really fast metabolism and a ridiculous activity load for those guys, but some guys actually do need 5,000. I've never seen anybody need more than that to gain weight. So the point is we can roughly estimate a calorie range, which will put them in what's called a calorie surplus. More calories are coming into their body than they're burning. If you get into a calorie surplus, you will gain weight, period. So the goal is getting these kids to understand what a calorie surplus feels like. And if you do that and you measure body weight, then all you're doing is playing with both sides of the equation. And you just increase calories if the body weight isn't increasing, and you shoot for a certain rate of weight gain. For most kids, a good goal is about 1.5 pounds per week of weight gain if they're really skinny. And again, the ebook lays out all sorts of, depending on the variables, depending on their level, their age, whether they need to gain 40 plus pounds or just gain 10 more pounds, that rate of weight gain will change. So if you're 200 pounds trying to get to 205, you don't need to gain 1.5 pounds a week, because you're very, very close to your genetic limit. You might gain 0.5 pound a week for 2 months. But for these super skinny kids, like when I was $155, I should have just been stuffing my face. And you can go a lot more aggressively. I didn't gain any noticeable fat from about 155 to $185. Like that first 30 pounds, I did not gain any visible leanness, did not lose any leanness whatsoever. From about 185 to 205, a lot more of that is going to be fat. For my frame, from 205 to 220, significantly more of that was fat. And so I kind of settled in for where my body likes to be, around 205, 210. But that's just in a nutshell the general process. There is a lot more detail that can go into it, but if you get the calorie balance side of the equation right, the adherence side, so you actually follow it and you track your body weight and you shoot for about 1 pound to 1.5 pounds a week of weight gain, you're going to gain weight.
Yeah.
You pair that with an actual solid lifting plan where you're working hard in the gym 3 or 4 days a week. It doesn't need to be 8 days a week, right? I thought I had to lift twice a day when I was 15. I thought more is always better.
Right.
I thought I had to do 20 sets of squats. Like
Instead
more
of
is not
10.
always better, but if you're working hard on a good program, you have a qualified strength coach building that, you pair those two things together, the majority of that weight is going to be muscle until you start getting pretty close your genetic limits.
Right. So you've got, a good 6-7 years of tread experience, seeing hundreds and thousands of pitchers, as well as your own, kind of discovery period. You've seen guys throw, high 90s. You've seen, the hard throwers, the guys who use force, that throw hard because of their size. You see the guys who are 180 that just move incredibly well, that throw hard. So it might be hard to do this, but if we had to talk mechanics and, maybe say the 2 or 3 areas where pitchers kind of get stuck the most as far as, not being able to throw harder, and then maybe 2 or 3 really just constants across the board that you see that hard throwers have.
For sure. So that is a tough question because, there are hundreds and hundreds of variables that go into the equation. You kind of alluded to this within the question in terms of different pitchers will produce that velocity differently. So there's a ton of variables, like lever length is one. The guy who's 6'6", he's just working with longer levers. His ceiling is going to be higher than the kid who's 5'2". It just is. Like I'm sorry that is the case. We do have 5'9" throwers who have thrown 98. So it doesn't mean that shorter athletes can't throw hard. But longer levers is a big one. The guy who's really whippy, really long levers is going to produce that force, produce that velocity differently than the athlete who's maybe very, very muscle bound, very tightly wound, can't get into, as deep of positions, doesn't get a huge amount of, hip shoulder separation, doesn't get a huge amount of layback. So understanding athletes are going to produce that force differently. You're going to have kind of slow, big, tight movers. You're going to have quick, whippy, loose movers, and you're going to have all sorts of examples in between. So we can kind of divide this into different aspects to look at from a nutrition standpoint, from a body composition standpoint, kind of 185 to 205 pounds or so as a general body weight range. I actually break it down in the ebook, depending on your height, what a good target is for your frame. But again, you're really not going to find too many hard throwers who are under a $180. If you go to the MLB.com or you go to Fangraphs, you sort by hardest average velocity, starters, relievers, it doesn't matter. When you look at body weights, you might see a couple guys in the entire league who are under 180 pounds, consistently throw 95 plus. It's really tough. And so we have thinking of Mike Pasco, one of our first, hard throwing shorter pitchers. He was 87, 88 when he came to us, 5'9", 160. And if I remember right, we got him up to 185, and he was up to 95 to 97, touching 98. So even at 5'9", like a $180 being a decent. Marcus Stroman, another guy, we haven't worked with him personally, but 5'9", about 180, 185. So the guys who are on the shorter end, they need to move really athletically. They need to be very strong. They need to build a decent amount of muscle mass and basically be like these perfect mechanics, very mobile, high force output, high power output. Those guys kind of need to max out all the variables to be able to throw hard. Whereas the guy that we're working with right now, Lane Ramsey, AAA with the White Sox, he's been up to 101, I believe. He just threw a 97-mile-an-hour rocker throw indoors a couple weeks ago, and he doesn't have to move perfectly to do that. His elbow's low. Lower half mechanics aren't perfect. He's got a lot. He does not move like a Marcus Stroman, but he throws harder than Marcus Stroman because he's got the lever length on his side. He's a just stud athlete with super long limbs. So that's the first thing, is try to look at your overall profile as a pitcher, as an athlete, and say, there's all these things that go into velocity. If you're let's say you're playing MLB The Show, you're doing create a player, and you have all these sliders. You're okay, strength, speed, flexibility, mechanical efficiency. It's okay, you only have so many points to spend on these things. So you can go strength all the way up, but then you maybe can't go speed as high. The goal is to dial all of those all the way up to the extent that we can, the things that are actually trainable. So when it comes to strength in the weight room, these are some basic metrics that almost any pitcher we work with can hit, at which point we say, okay, you're probably strong enough as a pitcher. Low to mid 400s deadlift for a few reps, 100-pound dumbbell bench press and dumbbell row for a few reps, mid 300s squat to parallel for a few reps. If you're going to do some sort of lunging movement, body weight reverse lunge, or 200-ish pound reverse lunge for a few reps. You start to hit those numbers, like that's a pretty good intermediate level of strength. I've seen very few players that get to those levels that aren't at least throwing in the mid 80s. Like even if they have a ton of mechanical deficiencies, those guys still throw in the low, mid, upper 80s. And then the guys that are stud athletes are throwing 90 plus once they get to those numbers. So you check the nutrition box, get over $180. If you're tall, you want to be over 200 pounds. You check the strength box. Can you hit those base numbers? Can you be as strong as a strong college player or as strong as like your average MLB player? Check. Okay, those are things that are very controllable. Once you start getting into mechanics, it's a little more difficult because there's a lot that goes into what constitutes optimal mechanics. Lead leg block, super important. If you're really soft through the lead leg, it's going to be very difficult to actually transfer that force up through your body and get it into the arm. If you're not creating any hip shoulder separation at all, again, very, very difficult to throw hard. More hip shoulder separation is not always better, but if you're in a very, very low range and your hips and shoulders rotate completely together, you're going to have a hell of a time trying to create that whip-like mechanism. Zero scapular loading. If you can't get your arms back behind your body when you throw at all, and your pec is just a rock and you're stuck in this rounded forward shoulder, rounded posture, you're going to have a very hard time allowing your arm to actually relax and whip like an arm should move. To go with that, if you have very limited layback, if you go to throw and your arm can't actually go into external rotation and you push the ball, it's going to be really tough to throw 90 plus miles an hour. So just off the top of my head, those are some of the most important variables where if you see that as a problem, you know that guy has 3, 4, 5 miles an hour at least left in the tank. If you see some sort of like tiny timing issue with where his arm is at landing, he's like here instead of there, you might not be talking about any velocity loss, or you might be talking about a mile an hour here or a mile an hour there. But some of those big ones like flying open really brutally with the front shoulder, no hip shoulder separation, lead leg totally collapses when they land, zero layback, you're probably talking about 5 or 10 miles an hour still left in the tank.
Take us through the typical tread process. I mean, obviously not every pitcher is going to be the same depending on what they need, but when you are, I guess the word is the tread onboarding process. So yep. I watch these videos, I get it excited. I know you mentioned it takes probably a little longer than you'd like on average for people to make that first contact with either you or with Cohen. What's that process like to get them to the point where, between I want to work with tread and here's the plan?
So the first thing is just seeing if they're a good fit, right? A lot of people just reach out, they have a question, we talk about that question, and if they're not a good fit, we give them, advice on whatever issue they're having and send them on their way, and they're happy and they got some feedback. Remote training is really a good option to consider for athletes that are very self-motivated. They don't need somebody who is there watching every single rep, every single throw. They need a plan that actually works and takes into account their own limiting factors, their own deficiencies. But they don't need someone there yelling at them to like make sure they do that final push-up or get all their reps in. Like a very self-motivated individual is the kind of guy who succeeds on remote training. The kid whose dad signs him up for training and he doesn't have any intention of actually following anything we send him isn't a good fit for remote training. So we actively turn them away. We say, here's some advice, here's some things you should work on, thanks, but no thanks. So that's the first thing, is kind of vetting them in that initial process, seeing if they're actually going to be someone who's going to follow the program, actually be committed to the process. And our athletes are with us for at least a year minimum. So that's a lot of time to actually create progress, see results, and allow the changes, the adaptations to really happen in your body. It's really difficult it's almost impossible really to make progress if you just go to like some camp for 3 days, pay $3,000 and think you're going to get your money back out. Like you think you're going to make significant progress. It's not that you might not learn a couple things, and that might still be worth it to you, to be honest, but you're not going to see these huge transformations in a three-day time period.
Transformations take weeks at least, right?
Yeah, and there's plenty of accounts out there. There's plenty of people out there where, they'll do fake before and after 1-day transformations, and they'll, the guys will come tell me after, like when we work with them, they'll say, yeah, that was a warm-up throw, and then he posted the full speed throw from the next week and said I gained 2 miles. He's like, that's not what happened.
Yeah, that's not real.
So we try to be very upfront and transparent about that. It's like, when you have a year to really work with somebody, that's when you can put on 25 or 30 pounds. That's when you can have a 3, 5, 10 mile an hour, swing in performance. So that's the first thing. As far as once they actually get started, we really can't create an individualized targeted plan without knowing what we're dealing with. So there's a pretty in-depth assessment process. Now there's a mobility screen. There's also a mechanical screen. There's also an injury history. We also want to know where their head's at. So we want to know kind of what their thoughts are regarding their mechanics, what they think they need to work on. We need to create buy-in with whatever we give them to make sure that they're actually going to follow it and maximally apply themselves to it. As far as the movement screen, it's again head to toe movement screen. I don't know if you're familiar with like functional movement screen. It's a pretty basic screen. We have a few things that are similar to that, but imagine that times like 5. So we're basically going head to toe, looking at every major joint in the body. Does it move like it's supposed to? Do your ankles move like ankles are supposed to, or do you have a major mobility limitation in inversion, eversion, dorsiflexion, plantar flexion? Do you have tibial rotation, hip extension, knee flexion, knee extension, hip rotation? That's a big one. Do your hips rotate properly? A lot of athletes are missing significant amount of mobility in their hips. Then they wonder why they're not throwing hard. They can't produce power at the plate for hitters. They wonder why their back is hurt because they're trying to get that rotation from the wrong segments. How does their mid back, their low back, their upper back move? Does their neck move properly? One thing we'll see is that athletes who don't have full range of motion in their neck, they'll fly open early with that shoulder when they throw because they can't keep their eyes on the target without opening up the shoulder to get their eyes on the target. Versus you look at a guy like Aroldis Chapman, his shoulders are all the way closed here. He's able to still pick up the target, keep his eyes on the target. So there's a lot of interconnected pieces where if you see some mechanical flaw, you need to also be able to see how they fared on the movement screen. And then you can put those two results side by side and be able to make those connections. A lot of the mechanical issues that you see are happening because their body can't move the way it needs to be able to move. And so you can address whatever issues you find, you can address those in their movement prep, you can address those in the weight room actually, and you can address those from a body preparation standpoint. And now they're starting to be able to get into better positions on the mound. Just because you've opened up that range of motion, you've given them better strength, better control of their body in space. So there's that piece of it. It actually allows us to interpret the mechanical issues that we see better.
So what's next for TREAD? Right? I mean, because you did mention earlier that it's almost like you're not backwards, but kind of the opposite of most companies in that you nailed the online piece. And then it was like, all right, let's build our training facility, which is now, as we said, down in Charlotte. What's kind of like the next step? TREAD, I want to say TREAD 2.0, but what's the immediate future? How do we contact you if working with TREAD Athletics is something we want to do?
Yeah, so like I said, we kind of did it in reverse, kind of did it the quote unquote wrong way, but now we're in kind of this hybrid model where we're still a remote first company. So all of the athletes that actually train in our in-house facility are also remote athletes of ours. So our college guys, for example, they're on a remote program with us, but then over the summers, they'll visit for a week, a month, or the entire summer. Our professional guys, again, they're on a program with us for the entire year, but for the off season, they'll again come in for a week, a month, or the entire off season. Same with the high school guys, maybe they'll come for a week over winter break or a month over winter break. And so this facility now, we have a 33,000 square foot facility in Charlotte, which is pretty cool. It took us, over a year and a half to finally get this building set up. The plan now is to use this building to support the remote athletes that we have, because everyone wants to come in and get that kind of next level look at what they're doing. To the extent that we can get guys better online, there are still some things that we can gather, information we can gather in person that you can't do remotely. So we have a level 2 in-person movement screen, power testing when they come in-house. We also have the technology and the data in-house as well. So we get them on the TrackMan. We get to look at their pitch movement profiles. We see that stuff anyway in some of the databases for like the pro guys. Every pitch they've ever thrown has the data on it in online databases, so we can look it up for them. But for high school and college guys,
you can't. No,
that's really valuable to be able to get them in there. And hey, they're like, hey, I throw a curveball. I'm really trying to decide if I want to throw a cutter or a slider. And like, we can get them on a bullpen and see how those pitches profile. We can test 5-10 different pitch grips, see which grip works best objectively, and then send them home with a usable cutter, usable slider. They can go practice on their own, or maybe they only have a Rapsodo back home that they can pitch to. But we can set up a Rapsodo and our TrackMan, and we can say, okay, the TrackMan's your gold standard, but based on when you get these results on the TrackMan, what does the Rapsodo say? Now they can go home and actually interpret, okay, this is my really good sinker movement profile. Confirm that on the TrackMan, and then they know that the Rapsodo reads 80 to 85% spin efficiency when they get that good sinker. So now they can go home, they can shoot for 80 to 85% spin efficiency when they throw that sinker to the Rapsodo, knowing it's not nearly as accurate on the movement side. So again, we can really implement some of the data, some of the technology aspect when guys come in-house. So that's kind of where we're continuing to scale, is again, trying to have as big of an impact on the industry as a whole. We added 20 new employees over this past year, so we're around 32 right now. Just continuing to spread our reach from that standpoint. We have a few kind of top secret projects that I can't talk about, but will be revealed in due time. So the plan is to keep learning, both myself and all of our coaches. One thing that's really cool behind the scenes that people don't see is we've launched this year what we call TREAD U, which may in the future evolve into courses that we kind of release. But for now, it's an internal education system that we've developed. It's like everything that I've kind of learned over 15 plus years, plus everything that all these other coaches have collectively learned, because a lot of them are kind of experts and have focuses and things that I don't know about. They have their own specific interests. Like, what if we could make a major in pitching development? Like, you can't go to college and have a master's in pitching development. If you could, like, I would have majored in that. Like,
so you got a lot of guys now interested in that.
Everybody would major in that, but it doesn't exist. So, like, our goal is, well, internally, we need to make sure that it does exist. And so, we have a guy with biomechanics masters, and so he built a biomechanics course the rest of the coaches can take, and coursework on anatomy, physiology, physics, all this type of stuff. If you could major in pitching development, you would. And so when a new coach comes to TREAD, gets hired, they're already cream of the crop, but we need to make sure they're prepared to coach professional guys, big league guys down the road.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the internal education system that we've been building. Again, many more iterations that need to take place before that we even consider releasing that to the public. But I think that's the one thing that we're most excited about, is that we can home grow talented coaches here now. It's the equivalent of, like, the Yankees they just go buy the best talent, right? We're not going to go hire every MLB pitching coach to TREAD.
Probably
We're
can't
not going to go buy every top pitching guy. But we don't have to. We can take a really bright 24-year-old who has a couple years of experience. Maybe he played professionally for a couple of years, and we see the potential, and you can home grow that talent and turn them into an elite level coach. And
it's not the Yankees approach. It's the Athletics, Rays, right?
The Rays, the Athletics, you name it.
Moneyball.
Exactly, and we realize, like, that's the way that we can actually scale, get players better, as a whole, because we're so concerned with, as we scale and grow. Like, I can't coach everybody. I coach a very small percentage now of the athletes that work with TREAD, because we have 20 plus coaches and hundreds of athletes. So again, my goal becomes kind of education as a whole, managing the systems so that we can make sure every athlete that comes through our remote and also in-house doors has the same experience. It's not that they're going to be coached exactly the same, but they're given the same attention to detail, whether they're a 15-year-old kid or whether they're a big league all-star.
Yeah. Well, we hope the body holds up a little bit for you, so you can do since we're New Jersey, we'll go with Mike Adams, and hope you can do like Mike, and get that. Not that your body types are the same, but that again, I guess he would go under that 5'9", 5'10", 180-pound guy that just. I'd
certainly like to do what he did last year, and get everything back where it needs to be and get signed. So I definitely like what he's doing up there.
That's right. We appreciate the time. Certainly, again, a lot of appreciation and respect, and for what TREAD Athletics is about, and what you guys have done for, as you said, the people that you do know, but also the times 10 people that you don't and probably never will, but have been just as impacted by things that you put out.
For sure. Yeah. And if anybody listening, wants more information on maybe they're struggling with something in their own career, or maybe it's a parent listening whose son is struggling, or maybe just wants another look at what they're doing, go ahead and email us at contact@treadathletics.com, and we'll take a look. Again, we're very responsive. We'll get on a call with just about anybody who's interested in what we're doing, what we have to do, and what we have to offer. So don't be shy. Feel free to reach out, and we'll go from there.
Absolutely. Ben Brewster, one of the best around and at what he does. And, our guest today on Jersey Baseball Show, we appreciate the time and look forward to catching everyone next time.